Welcome back, YouTube. I wanted to go over some of the micro levels here that we need to hit. My last video, we talked about the macro and looking at like some of the bigger trend reversals, obviously some tests on some of these all-time high, not all-time highs, but this season's high, this current bull runs highs, which would for Doge would be around like 22 cent, for Bitcoin around 73,000. Those are going to be some of the levels we need to hit on the macro level for testing the all-time high, kind of recharging the bull run. But I wanted to take a look here at some of the micro levels here, because I do believe that's kind of important here, just to kind of see and track progression here. So we have right now price action Doge breaking into a new zone here in the fib to play the 0.1223, also closing in on the 200-day moving average. That's this red line here. Really, because obviously this is a bullish trend here. Where's my little line? There we go. Obviously, this is a bullish trend here. If we're able to maintain it, it will look something like that. If you're able to see that blue line here. But what we're looking at here is for the progression and to go up and do some of these retests so that we can have a progressive movement in this bull run. Obviously, closing in this zone above the 1223, above the I'll go here because I clearly moved this on accident. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so obviously closing in this new zone here above the 1223, which it looks like we're getting, there's a battle going on right now, because you can see that it's red and we're threatening to close down higher, or, excuse me, close down lower. But we have been in that zone today. This is the daily candle. So we can obviously track this over the next few days. And again, if we close red today, we've had 4 green days in a row. So it's not, like the end of the world. But obviously, if we're talking about on the micro level, it's important for the progression of this trend to continue that upward movement and ultimately close in this 1223 zone here. And this zone really opens up around 1247 and closes out at around 1486. So it's a good zone to get started talking about 16, 18 cents again, if we're able to get some movement in here. And certainly if we're able to get above the 200 and above the 200 and build some support there. Even if you're long term, or if you are looking for entries and stuff inside the coin, even like 200-day moving averages, catching anything above 200-day. I said the same thing about stocks. If it's Apple, Microsoft, anything, typically speaking, below the 200-day is always very beneficial, because it normally does not consolidate there long, especially if it's a trend for upward movement. So your conviction can be the judge of that. But when we start having if we start getting some evidence here of like trend reversals, and we start having some crosses here, 14,200, 1472, then we can kind of get a bigger idea. Something to also watch here is the 72 crossing the 200, because just now we can kind of get a reversal here, and if we get a flattening of the 72 and the 200 and get a cross to the upside of the 14. If we have a breakdown, let's say Dogecoin gets to the 200-day moving average, right? And then we get rejected and we go back down to around 9 cents or so. That will open up the possibility of the 72 crossing the 200, which would be an even stronger signal for the downside than what we got from this rejection here of the 14 and the 72. So that's something to keep in mind. There's still a pretty decent gap in between the two there, but I wanted to put that out there. That's something we'll obviously have to monitor here over the coming weeks to kind of see what the trend's going to be. But that's something, those indicators are, it's like a month and a half, and obviously almost a year indicator. So that's something you will certainly see coming. But it's just something to kind of keep in mind when you're looking at price action here on the charts. So for Bitcoin, let's take a look here. Price action, Bitcoin is hovering right above, well, at least right at, slightly above the 72. And this is what I meant for as far as the price action with Doge. If you're able to catch it below the 200, it typically, if you're in a strong movement season, or bull run season, stuff like that. Typically, it does not consolidate below there. So it bounced relatively quickly from a below the 200-day, and literally we're at the 72 now. Same thing on the macro level. Before we start talking about the micros, I have to see a test to like the 73 side, and start seeing some ascension higher to kind of like rejuvenate the bull run and talk about some of those higher highs, 6-figure Bitcoin, and all the higher numbers for Doge. Similar things here on the macro, but on the micro, we haven't lost the top zone here for Bitcoin, which is actually really good. If we're breaking down below fib levels and not getting these rejections here, this would be a much harder situation to turn around. So I believe it's actually great here that Bitcoin is staying within this top level here for fib, and we're going to see how it responds here off of the 72, right? Because you can have like these quote unquote death crosses, like 14 crossing the 72 downtrend and 14 crossing the 200, but you can see even though we got the death cross here, it recovered relatively quickly, right? So because even by the time the 14 crossed the 200, Bitcoin was already recovering, right? So because it tanked so quickly below the 200, you can say, oh, okay, this is going to be a death cross here between the 14 and the 200. So this could be a dip to the downside. This is going to send us into this lower zone here around like 50K or so, but it recovered relatively quickly. The biggest thing, a huge indicator, same thing that we talked about with Doge, would be the 72 crossing the 200 or something like that. But this is a extremely wide gap for Bitcoin. So we'd have to, in order to get a cross of like that for Bitcoin, we'd have to tank relatively low. So I'm talking about low 50s, high 40s, and stay there to get a death cross of that magnitude for Bitcoin. So I don't think that we're going to see that for Bitcoin here. So I think that right now, what we have to kind of focus on is some of these smaller retests here. And obviously that's going to be at around like 70K. So if we're talking about like another $6,000 here, maintaining, not getting rejected off of the 72 day moving average, this orange line right here. So in similar price action, what we're seeing with Doge, we saw the push down here to around 62. And now we're kind of having that battle here around the 72-day moving average. So on the micro levels, we're going to need to start entertaining that run to around 70,000 before we can start talking about some retest up here. And then we can open up that conversation for resuming the bull run. That's one of the things to kind of look at, because in my opinion, I don't necessarily like to, talk about, okay, hey, if we hit this level, then, the bull run's back on, because where these coins have consolidated at, there are several levels before we can even get to a point of retesting the highs of this run. Especially for Bitcoin, with the previous highs being the all-time high, there's a few levels that we need to hit kind of in between there, and then we have to break those with conviction. It's a lot of things that we're going to have to kind of entertain when we are talking about what's it going to take to resume the run overall. So there's some of the things that I'm looking for on the micro and the macro here. Again, I haven't seen any divergence much in the market. I think the market overall today is up around 1%. Let's take a look here. What's going on? There we go. All right, so I think the market's up around 1.30%. Overall, last 7 days, again, this is a bullish trend. Certainly, I love how this is ascension here to the upside. Again, if your coin is in the top 10, you're getting similar patterns like this. Not a divergence. This is good, right? All right, 7, Coin, Doge, Cardano. Everybody's kind of doing their own thing here, but we have that very similar patterns here. So that divergence has not broken here. Doge up 15.77% on the 7-day, 2.06% on the 24-hour. Over $1 billion in volume. I won't say in price action or in purchases, but over $1 billion in volume in the last 24 hours, right? So you can compare that to Coin number 8, and that gives you an idea. So with this current climb, Dogecoin is around 300 million from jumping Coin here. So you can kind of get an idea of the flow here. So even though and you can see the trend, like it's not, Coin's trend here is not as aggressive, even though it's green. If you kind of look at over here to the right side of the screen on the last 7 days, you'll see the difference in aggression level here between like a Doge and a Coin or XRP. These two, it's not following the price movement of Bitcoin as closely. So that's why you have this volume here where pretty much in the last 24 hours, Doge has done 5 times roughly the volume that Coin has done, right? So we possibly, if this trend continues, we can possibly see, even though the coins are overall down, you can possibly see Dogecoin move up again in the top 10 just because of a sheer volume and interest level projection here. So this is very, very interesting, right? So it's obviously something we're gonna have to look at. Again, in a nutshell, it's not that big of a deal, but overall, it just kind of shows you that when you are, the closer your moves are tied to Bitcoin and some of the market makers, the easier it's going to be to maintain your spot and interest level in the top 10 and even move, right? Once that, this is a perfect example of what I mean by why I check these numbers to see divergence, right? The closer your movement is tied to, and I talked about this in my last video, the closer your moves are tied to Bitcoin and the market makers' movements, the easier it's going to be to maintain your spot and show the interest that institutions have in your coin, right? Once you start to see some divergence there, there's some repositioning going on behind the scenes. And you're going to see evidence of that by not only the money aspect, but also in the trend. You're going to see a divergence of that in the trend and in the charts. And you're going to see a break, right? And this is when you start losing positions and stuff. And that's how you know that there's a repositioning going on there. So something to keep an eye on. But right now, Doge, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all doing fine, maintaining their positions here, trending together. So those are just some of the numbers we're going to have to look for on the micro and the macro side. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. We have time still to beat Bitcoin to 100,000. So if you'd love to help with that, please consider subscribing to the channel. I appreciate all of you. Thank you. And I'll see you guys in the next video.